one of the very big mistakes that a lot of firms who are flat fee tend to miss is how to set the right targets for the number of cases that you need for your business to make financial sense. And if you really want to take a step back and you want to say, well, how do I look at this for my entire firm? So if you're growing your law firm, at some point, you're going to have to figure out compensation for your staff because you're going to be adding more people, but you need to figure out if we're going to add these people, how do we make sure that we are giving them the right targets or we have the right things in place to actually make financial sense for making these hires? Because a lot of times firms struggle to grow because they don't either set the right targets or they're just afraid that, hey, we're not going to have enough money because they've never done the math on it. And I will say the math can get quite complicated. So we created a simple compensation negotiation calculator that you can use where all you need to do is plug in a few numbers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to make it really big and I'm going to walk you through how this calculator works. So we've set up 3 different scenarios in this calculator to where, let's say if you wanted to see it on a scale, let's say we're hiring an attorney and their annual salary is going to be 175, between 175 and 125. So what we've done here is you plug in what the annual salary will be. The employer portion of payroll taxes are going to calculate based on this rate. So let's say if you're in if this ends up being lower, you can always change that percentage and you see these numbers right here change. And let's say if you're going to offer benefits, let's say if you're not going to offer benefits, but let's leave the benefits in there for now. And then what you can do is you can plug in a number here to say, hey, if we hire this person, as far as bar dues go, we got to buy a computer, or if there's any other starting costs, what I would do is let's just go ahead and plug that number in here. Let's say if it's $10,000, and we're just going to connect all of these back to that $10,000 so you can see, hey, here's what the startup initial cost is going to be to get this employee started with the firm. So now we can see on an annualized basis, this person is going to cost the firm X amount of dollars based on that salary. Now, what you do, next thing you want to do is if you're doing hourly billing, you want to plug in what is the billable rate for this person. So let's say if this person's billable rate is $350 an hour. So we're just going to plug in $350 an hour. And then what we want to do is we want to identify what do we want our ROI to be? Now, the ROI is another word for return on investment. And when it comes down to the ROI, the way you want to think about this is, I want this person to produce enough revenue for the firm so that they're able to cover their costs. And then they're also able to contribute to overhead. And they're also able to contribute to covering all the profitability and the taxes for the firm. So a general rule of thumb is that you want your staff to produce 3 times what they cost the firm. So if we think about it that way and we plug in 3 here. So let's say if this is going to be 3, and let's just plug that across. So based on this salary at this billable rate, we've now identified for this person to produce a 3 times ROI. What this tells me is they would need to bill about 1,818 hours a year in billable work in order for them to produce a 3 times ROI. Now, let's say if you hired an attorney at $125,000 for their annual salary, well, that person only needs to bill about 1,323 hours a year to actually have a 3 times ROI. And if you wanted to look at it to see, okay, what does that mean for what did their weekly billable rates have to be? And so let me move this out so you can fully see that. So if you wanted to see, well, what does that break down to on a weekly basis? Well, what we've done here is we use a 48-week kind of basis just because, hey, after vacations and holidays, time when the firm is actually closed, we calculate, okay, all right, what is the average number of billable hours that they need to have on a weekly basis to be able to achieve this revenue target. So when you use this type of tool, and let's say you're in the process of trying to make an offer to a new attorney, and they come back and they say, hey, well, can we do this salary? Well, instead of you having to just kind of think on your feet to figure it out, especially if it's virtual, you can just pull up this calculator, plug in the whatever numbers they said, and let's see how the math works out. Now, let's see a similar thing for a paralegal. Let's say you're hiring a paralegal and it's going to be let's say anywhere from 65,000 all the way up to, let's say, 85,000. And let's say this paralegal, their billable rate is going to be something like, let's say, 175 an hour. Well, if you do 175 an hour, now we kind of know, okay, in order for them to be at a 3 times ROI, if we paid them $85,000, that means they're going to need to do about 38 billable hours a week. Now, I will tell you, that's probably not very realistic, because that means almost every hour of their day is going to be billable. And I just don't see that to be very common in small to medium-sized firms. More so what I see is probably somewhere between 25 to 35 billable hours, and actually more like 25 to like 32 billable hours a week is usually what I see. So you have a choice here. Either you go with you can only offer them a lower salary in order for you to hit this target, or let's see if you had some space for you to increase what their billable rate is. Because let's say if their billable rate went to 185 an hour, well, it starts to change the numbers, and you start to see like, hey, it doesn't take that many billable hours to actually achieve the goal. So here what you can see, the two drivers that you're going to have is either changing their salary or changing the billable rate, or you lower the target. Now, I am not a fan of you lowering the target, because that's just going to put more financial pressure on you as a firm, and it's going to lower your profitability. So my suggestion is, you probably want to be a little bit, figure out like, hey, are we priced properly for the area that we're in, for the type of law that we practice? Now, if you need some help, a great CFO can help you. I mean, it's one of the things that we do. We help firms analyze these types of things, because your problem might not be that you need to get your team to work more. It may be that maybe you don't have the right pricing. Now, for those of you who may be thinking, well, I don't do hourly billing. Well, in this template, we've also included a flat fee structure. Now, the way the flat fee structure works, very similar to the hourly billing. You plug in what is their annual salary, and then you plug in what your average case value is. Now, average case value is going to be based on looking at the types of cases that you usually support, like how much is each of those cases worth? And the higher the value, the lower the number of cases that they actually have to support to be able to achieve their goal. So let's say in this case, if your firm, the average case usually brings in about $4,500 in revenue per case. Well, if that's your average case value and their salary is 125, that means it's going to take you probably about 101 cases to be able to achieve a 3 times ROI. But let's say if your average case value was $6,300, what you'll notice is it doesn't take as many cases to actually validate or to achieve that 3 times ROI. And what I will tell you is, depending on the type of firm that you are, the ROI target may need to be a little bit higher depending on the type of firm that you have. But a simple ROI calculator tool like this can really help you kind of understand like, hey, do we have the right target set for our team? And especially if you are flat fee, one of the very big mistakes that a lot of firms who are flat fee tend to miss is how to set the right targets for the number of cases that you need for your business to make financial sense. And if you really want to take a step back and you want to say, well, how do I look at this for my entire firm? What you could do is just take the cost of your entire firm. Let's say if you wanted to say, hey, my entire firm, if I looked at it and I said, hey, from the paralegals to, the attorneys to the legal assistants, and let's say if all of that, we added everyone on the legal team's salary together, and we said, hey, our average case value is usually somewhere around, let's say if it's $15,000. Well, if your average case is around $15,000, what that tells me, in order for you to hit a 3 times what your entire staff costs, you're going to need about 58 cases. Now, what that means is now you have a very clear target to go to your marketing team to say, hey, now that we know that we need 58 cases for this firm to make financial sense, now you have a very clear target to give to your marketing team. And using different tools like this can really make it a lot easier for you to kind of plan and for you to adjust, so you're not having to kind of just take a shot in the dark and just hope that you actually land in the right place, but you can actually do the math and end up in a much better place as a firm. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Law Firm and Finance Show, where we give you great content that helps you build a more successful law firm. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on all platforms and follow us for more content.